If you've heard about the male loneliness epidemic, you may have wondered why there is no female loneliness epidemic, or at least why it isn't spoken of. Now, I want to stress that I am not claiming that the reasons for this are anything intrinsic either to men or women. I am claiming that these are ways we are socialized, but not anything natural to either gender. And the reason we talk about the male loneliness epidemic is because both now and historically, it is men who yield the vast majority of benefits that come from long-term relationships. And of course, it is also men that suffer the vast majority of complications due to being single, especially when they are chronically single or single for a long period of time. Now, it may seem like an exaggeration to call it an epidemic. I don't think it's called that specifically because there are so many men that are chronically single, but because of the severe effects that brush against every aspect of men's lives. About 69% of adult Americans were in some kind of long-term relationship, either married or cohabitating. And with 1% not giving an answer, that leaves about 30% of adult Americans who are not in a relationship. Now, about half of that 30% said that they were not interested in dating or finding a partner. And of the 15% that remain, about half are men and half are women. And of that 7%, it is only a very small fraction of men who are chronically single. The manosphere itself is a very small percentage of men, and unfortunately, they do get a larger platform than their raw numbers would indicate is reasonable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MGTOW. If you don't know what that is, a quick summation would be it stands for men going their own way. It is a reactionary, male supremacist, anti-feminist, misogynistic view where men believe that the system itself, particularly relationships and dating and love and marriage, is against them. It does not benefit them at all. It is a rejection of any close, intimate relationships with women. Basically, women's only value to men is sexual. This is true of the manosphere in general. The worst possible sin is ever liking a woman, loving a woman, caring about a woman, doing something kind for a woman, talking to a woman for any other reason other than to have sex with her. And to have sex with her is not a mutual act of pleasure. It is something she is used for, like an object. And valuing anything about a woman other than her ability to give you sexual gratification is considered shameful because women are inferior. They are your enemy. And if you get close to them, they will hurt you. Everything they do is manipulative, and you should never trust them because they are not capable of love. So MGTOWs can have sex with women, though judging from what I've seen on their forums, it's not something that they're able to keep up for very long. Pun intended. Hating women, having so much fear and animosity towards women, is very counterproductive towards a healthy and happy sex life with women. These are not men that are going to have deep and intricate fantasies about women unless it involves hurting or demeaning women, because just like doing anything kind for women, that is something that their own ideology pushes against, because they do not see women as full human beings or partners. They see them as objects to be used for sexual gratification. And that's at best. At worst, they see women as worthy of punishment and humiliation and degradation because they believe women are guilty of destroying the capacity for love itself, which seems like a pretty big deal if you ask me. Then again, I guess they don't value love very much because that isn't masculine, and all of this is, of course, a cult of masculinity at the end of the day. You could see how this pushes people towards far-right views. It is obviously reactionary, and it is hard to square this with something like Marxism, where you do have to consider the material conditions of oppression, which at the moment are ones where men control the vast majority of wealth and political power, institutional power, academic power. Men are the ones that tend to be in positions of power, and they do control, of course, the means of production. Though there are women in positions of power, it is overwhelmingly male-dominated. The overarching idea is that relationships for men are just not something worth pursuing because of the way modern women and feminism have ruined them. It is difficult to explain just how inaccurate this assumption is, because categorically, the vast majority of benefits of relationships go to men. Almost every major factor of men's lives is improved, often drastically, by being in a long-term relationship. Most of the factors we look at when we're looking to determine people's general well-being, health, and happiness are improved for men by being in a long-term relationship in ways that nothing else tends to affect their lives as much. And just to demonstrate how errant the claim of MGTOW is that relationships are just a bad deal for men in this day and age. This is just a short, but by no means complete list of the things that are improved on average by being in a relationship for men. Lifespan, health span, happiness and life satisfaction, higher income, more job security. They not only have sex more frequently, but report much higher sexual satisfaction. Men in relationships are less likely to be chronically isolated. Even being a heavy smoker, that is, smoking a pack and a half a day, has the equivalent effect on lifespan as being chronically isolated for men. Men in relationships have vastly improved mental and emotional health. They are less likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. They're less likely to attempt or commit suicide. They are much less likely to abuse substances because men are socialized to rely on women for so many things, their social lives and emotional and psychological well-being being among them. Most of these things are correlated to being in a relationship, in that when men get divorced or break up, these benefits evaporate. Men in relationships overall are more likely to engage in more pro-social behavior. They also do a lot less unpaid domestic labor. Men benefit extremely from women doing this unpaid labor. And of course, it isn't just the unpaid domestic labor, it's the caretaking work, it's the emotional labor, and the social labor of just maintaining social lives and social connection. And if you think back to something like Christmas when you were a kid, for most of us, it was our moms that made Christmas magic. It just didn't happen. It was because our mothers planned things and decorated things and organized things and made sure everyone got a gift and everyone had something in their stocking and made all the calls to plan parties and make sure people got together and cooked all the food and cleaned up and did all the work that's involved in making Christmas happen. And some men might say that this isn't important to them, but I mean, I hate to say it, but if they truly believe that men are that much more logical, they should look at the facts. And the fact of the matter is, it is important to do some of those little things just to maintain social connection. The trade-off for millennia was that women would be men's entire support system. Basically, their entire lives were built upon the unpaid and often unseen, unappreciated work of women. And we've traded that for financial security we couldn't get any other way because we weren't allowed to have jobs, bank accounts, we weren't allowed to own property, we weren't allowed to vote or hold high office. And now that women have the ability to financially support themselves, we can choose who and even if we are in relationships. This trade-off didn't really benefit women that much because we're still doing the vast majority of unpaid labor and caretaking work and social and emotional work. We just also are working 9-to-5 jobs, and when you tally all labor, women do work longer hours than men despite being paid significantly less. The equal sharing of this work has gotten even worse. I have to mention the orgasm gap has also not budged. Though we've seen some progress on the valuing of consent and the criminalization of marital rape, gender roles in straight relationships hasn't really changed all that much in 30 years, despite what anti-feminists claim. And the fact that women really don't have a lot to gain from relationships, as well as men who are seemingly demanding all the things and more, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that this would happen. Don't want to place the blame entirely on men. I am not going to defend misogynistic men, but I do think there is something to be said for how men get into this mindset, because they are put in a position where they were expecting to get a wife just based on being able to get a good job and to support her. As misogynistic as this is, that was the expectation, that is what they were fed, and they consider it emasculating to have that taken away from them. But it's interesting, this is obviously an economic problem, where right now households need 2 incomes just to survive. Very few people can make a good living even off those 2 incomes. By and large, Americans of any gender are not looking at capitalism as the cause of this precarity. We are looking at gender roles. And of course, the far right is going to swoop in and offer their solution is telling men that women are taking your jobs and to get them back in the kitchen and everything will be all right. And they feel they've lost this power over women, and offering it back when they've lost power economically and continue to do so is very tempting. But of course, that isn't going to solve the problem. We are still going to have economic equality even if women are enslaved to men again and forced to be in relationship with them. And I don't know what to tell men who believe this is their only chance of getting a woman. I guess I would ask them, why do you want someone who is forced to be with you? Do you really think so lowly of yourself that you have nothing to offer that would entice someone who is like you, who is a true partner to you, to actually be with you willingly? Because I think you're selling yourself short. I don't want to dismiss men who faced legitimate emotional abuse or even physical or sexual abuse from partners. That is not my intention. But this is not what I believe is happening with MGTOW, and the reason for this is one of the more comical aspects of MGTOW, which is this fantasy they have about how all the women that wrong them are going to be so sorry because as a result, men are just going to pull out of relationships entirely because, Jane Doe divorced or rejected or didn't sleep with Joe Schmo 10 years ago. Obviously, the end result of that is going to be civilization collapse. And if she would have known that, she would be so sorry and she would be begging for that. You know it. And as a result of all these men leaving relationships with women, it's going to be chaos, crying out for whatever man that they wronged to save them from this chaos that they didn't know would happen as a result of them rejecting this man. And I had 3 comments on my last video that were describing how this was going to happen. So to outside observers, obviously this is a lot of sour grapes combined with extreme emotional immaturity. When you listen to the gripes that these men have about women, about how all their ex-girlfriends were insane and delusional, and they all had personality disorders, and of course nothing was ever their fault, and how they were always nagged about things. And look, I'm not denying that it's hard out there. It's hard dating, especially on dating apps. They aren't doing you any favors. They amplify the shallowest parts of what we are, and they are difficult for men. No one is denying that. I'm not saying that every man who's struggling, it's his own fault, but blaming feminism, blaming the fact that women can choose to be with a partner or not, unfortunately, there's not much we can do for men like this. They believe any woman who shows any ounce of caring is just trying to manipulate him, and they're probably not going to listen to their male friends either, because if their male friends are in relationships, well, that just means they're a simp. It couldn't be that they're actually happy. I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably a good thing that these men are not dating women. Unfortunately, some of them are still sleeping with women and doing so in a way that tends to be a bit emotionally abusive. I want to make clear that there's nothing wrong with hooking up with people and not having emotional attachment. There is a problem if the reason you do this is because you believe women are inhuman monsters that do not deserve any compassion or caring or consideration. Obviously, I think that goes without saying, but most men are not like this. And it is fine if you don't want to settle down with someone and get married. It is fine if you just want to have casual sex. I mean, there are people who are aromantic, there are people who are asexual. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. This is something entirely different because their justification for doing these things is hatred of more than half of humanity. And I definitely don't want to make it sound like happy relationships with men are impossible. I happen to know that it is very possible. It is difficult to find these men. If there is demand for it, I will consider doing red flags for the red pill, because men in these groups do have very specific tropes, very specific phrasing and words and thought patterns and habits that are pretty easy to notice once you know them. The majority of people know how ridiculous the things they say and do and believe are. Don't lose hope. There's still great men and women out there. And don't forget, we are actually living in a golden age for relationships. And feminism, rejecting sexist stereotypes and traditional gender roles, is very important to healthy relationships and satisfying sex lives. And if you do find a partner who sees you as an equal, you have a great chance of staying together. Divorce rates are actually at a record low. For women who marry after 30, who have a college education, divorce rates are under 30%. We can't let the ridiculous revenge fantasies of bitter misogynists define dating for us. So if you're a man who isn't a raging misogynist, or you're a woman who's willing to be patient enough to find that guy, it's actually a pretty good time to date and be in relationships.